Good Sunday morning, Houdat Nation, and a happy week 18 to our Bayou Blitz family. Yeah, that's right. In the snap of the fingers, the 2024-25 regular season is gone. We are entering the last weekend of said regular season, and we are doing so with our New Orleans Saints after a 2-0 start, plummeting to near the bottom of the league standings as they finish up at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this afternoon, missing the playoffs for a fourth straight year. So with that kind of downer news, I am Bob Rose. I'm one of your co-hosts to your Bayou Blitz Week 18 pregame show, and joining me, and Happy New Year to you, Brendan Boylan. Thank you for joining me. In this. I don't even want to call it a therapeutic pregame. Merciful, I think it feels like a good word.
Sure. Yeah, it's over. That's what I said as soon as we got on before we hit the live was at about 4:30 today. The season's finally over. Which is funny. I had some people over the other day, and one of those guys I hadn't seen since week 2. And we were trying to figure out, like, hey man, it's been a while. You know, you got busy, I got busy, travel schedules, all that stuff. I was like, when's the last time I saw you? We were thinking about it. It was like sometime during football season. I was like, oh yeah, week 2. Like, you were hanging out. We were watching week 2. It was like the last time that I was a happy Saints fan. But that feels like a lifetime ago at this point.
Yeah.
It has been a roller coaster of the season. Injuries have continued to plague this team and plague this team into its final week against Tampa Bay, where you're going to be looking at your TV screen or your monitor, however you watch the games, or if you're going to be in the stadium today in Tampa Bay, you're going to be looking down on the field or on your screens. You're going to go, who is that? It's kind of got to that point with the injuries. Now, at the same time, you could always play the card of, even if some of these guys were healthy enough to go, do you really want them to go?
Right.
All those things make sense, but no Alvin Kamara, no Derek Carr. Name a receiver, and they're probably not going. Battered offensive line. No Kendre Miller. Like, the list goes on. So offensively, it is a who's. It's not a who's who, like in a good way. It's a who's who type of outing today.
It literally, because the Saints offense is going to be without, as you said, Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara, Kendre Miller, Taysom Hill, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Bub Means, Eric McCoy, Lucas Patrick. Defensively, the Saints are going to be without Pete Werner, Willie Gay, and obviously Paulson Adebo still on injured reserve. And that's a lot of the official inactives reflect all that. Kamara, Carr, Werner, Kendre, Willie Gay, Mason Tipton not active, and Christian Boyd not active. There we have it. But like you said, you never want to say that the Saints have nothing to play for. I've never liked that saying. If you're a competitor, you have something to play for every time you step out onto the field. But playing an injured Kamara, an injured Carr, a concussed Chris Olave, and those are the 3 players that were, the major questions, coming into this week. You have nothing to gain by playing them. It would have been great if Alvin got the 50 rushing yards he needed for his first 1,000-yard season, a rarity in Saints history. But you don't want to put that groin injury at risk. You certainly don't want to put Chris Olave and his and the number of concussions that he's had in his career, let alone this season, in any further risk. Mainly because you have, again, nothing to gain from it. I'm not going to say that. Never ever will the competitor in me let me say, well, they have nothing to play for. Now, anybody that says that, or anybody that wants the team to lose or believes the team should lose, and we'll get into draft position in a minute. My comeback to you is, if you've ever played a competitive sport, you certainly weren't any good at it, and you're not someone that I want on any team I've played or coached. With that, I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, I mean, for some of these guys that are going to be on the field today, it is perhaps their first opportunity in the NFL, right? Some of those practice squad elevations are guys that just got signed because, well, there's nobody else at that position that's healthy enough to play. Well, your first game in the NFL or your first opportunity to make a special teams play, you're not thinking about what the record is. You're not thinking about anything past what's in that moment. For the guys that it may be their last snap of the football with the New Orleans Saints, which is something we'll get into more in the offseason, more so than today. But guys with their futures with the team in question, they're not thinking about that. They're not thinking about what the record is. They want to put their best foot forward and play the best game possible to close out the season, end on a high note, end on something positive. For guys like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who missed so much time over the last few seasons with the Kansas City Chiefs, this is his opportunity to do what? Play for another NFL contract. Because while it wasn't a physical injury and it was a mental health break from football, there's going to be a lot of questions of a guy, especially a running back, who hasn't played in a couple years consistently, right? He's playing for a contract. Do you think he cares what the record of the team is? Spencer Rattler. And how many times have you heard this over the course of our times covering the NFL from quarterbacks in particular? You don't know when your last NFL start's going to be. Nothing's guaranteed in this league unless you're the Mahomes, the Bradys, the Breezes, the top name guys. Then, yeah, you're probably going to be starting somewhere next year. For Rattler, who knows? This might be the last start he gets in his NFL career. You think that he's like, there's nothing really to play for? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, no, these guys are going to go out there. It might not be pretty. I mean, shoot. Here, you know what? We'll transition into draft position by ending on a funny note here. And it has to be funny because if it wasn't funny, it's just painful. What do you think the over-under is for today for Saints total points scored? Just Saints total points scored. What do you think the over-under is?
17.
14.5. So the odds makers in sunny, I would assume it's sunny, Las Vegas, Nevada, are really teetering on the fence whether the Saints are going to score 2 touchdowns or not. That's how tough it is right now with the injuries, with the season in general. But yeah, the Saints offense also doesn't care about those numbers. The Saints defense doesn't care that Mike Evans needs 100 yards to pass 1,000 for whatever many straight years it's been. And I know he's got some incentives as well if he gets over 85 receiving yards today or somewhere around that number. Saints defense doesn't care. They want to.
I actually disagree on that one. The New Orleans Saints do not like Mike Evans specifically and do not like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in general. So, again, back to what are we playing for? We're playing to potentially ruin the season of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We're playing to potentially cost Mike Evans money. If I'm a player on a team that's not going to the playoffs, those kind of things are going to motivate me. Now, I admit I'm wired differently than the average human being. But we know how, Cam Jordan, for example, feels about the Buccaneers, the Falcons, the Panthers, the division rivals. So those are the kind of things that I suspect would motivate a Cam Jordan, would motivate a Tyrann Mathieu, again, would motivate the true competitors in your locker room.
That's a fair point. I think the biggest thing today, too, for this team, and you kind of just said it there, it's a division rival. So anybody that doesn't think that these guys wake up with motivation to beat a division rival, and remember, too, I mean, it's kind of, I don't know, it's the lesser of two evils here, but if the Saints win and the Falcons win, the Falcons get in, so the Saints stop Tampa's season from continuing. So, there are different incentives for players to go out there and, really try to ruin a season outside of their own because they've already done that. which is
quite successfully.
which is a good segue into draft position. And again, this is stuff that we'll talk about a lot in the offseason between draft position, needs, head coaching search, all of that. But right now, the Saints, as it stands today, are like picking 9th or 10th, if I'm not somewhere in that range, right?
They're 10th.
They're 10th. So
Yep.
With a loss today and some other things, they could jump a little bit higher in the draft order. But Bob, with a top 10 pick, having your own first round pick certainly helps. That hasn't been the case always for the Saints when we've covered them. There's a lot of needs. There's a lot of things they could do with that top 10 pick. But there are a lot of fans today, and I've seen it on social media, and you certainly have as well, that are saying, wow, like this is a golden opportunity for the Saints to lose and not just help their draft position, but keep the Falcons out of the playoffs. Now, I get it from a fan standpoint, as Bob and I just talked about for the last 10 minutes. Like, that's not how these players are going to be thinking. But Bob, with a top 10 pick and the potential to jump to probably somewhere in the range of like 5 to 7, if depending on how certain things fall today, do you feel like the draft position accurately depicts the Saints season? Because sometimes there's some times where you find yourself in the bottom 7 of the league, and you go, you know what, I don't think this is a bottom 7 team.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I do think this is a bottom 7 team in the league. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would not only agree with that, I'd call them a bottom 5. You've lost to the Carolina Panthers. You've lost to the Las Vegas Raiders. You nearly lost to the New York Giants. When you were playing a team with a winning record, you got drubbed out of the building. Case in point, your opponent today, the Buccaneers, the Packers, the Chiefs, the Broncos, who I don't believe are a very good team, it drubbed you out of your own building. And we can go on and on. So yeah, I truly believe that their draft position. I don't believe that their draft position depict how bad they've actually been the majority of this year. It's just like the Saints' luck to have an absolutely abysmal season like they have, but so many other double-digit loss teams in the National Football League, and you're only sitting at 10th. And by the way, for the people all week that are saying you need to, you need to lose because if you win, you'll worsen your draft position. Untrue. The Saints are stuck at no worse than the 10th overall pick. And here's how that unfolds. Only one other team. If the Saints win, they'll have 6 wins. The only other team currently with 6 wins is the San Francisco 49ers. If the 49ers lose today and the Saints win, both teams are at 6 wins. However, the Saints would get the higher draft pick based off of strength of schedule and strength of wins. By that same token, if they lose today, and teams to watch here are the Raiders, the Jaguars, and the Jets. Because if those teams win and the Saints lose, then you're talking about Raiders, Jags, Jets. Any of those teams win, they would have 5 wins. Obviously, the Saints would finish with 5 wins if they win today or if they lose today. But again, strength of schedule. I do not be, and strength of schedule, strength of wins when it comes to draft positioning is actually supersedes head-to-head wins and losses. So in other words, the Raiders win over the Saints. It doesn't mean any. That's like the third tiebreaker in determining draft position. And Raiders, Jags, Jets, say all those teams lose and or win, and the Saints lose. I think the Saints could only move as if I did my calculations correctly, and I admit I could be wrong. That's why I did not write an article on this. I believe the highest the Saints could move up is 8th, and I acknowledge that I could be wrong on that. But again, the Saints will do no worse than where they are right now, which is the 10th overall pick, no matter what happens today.
Bob, you are correct. This information coming from Luke Johnson and was shared by Cat Terrell as well this morning. The Saints currently own the 10th pick of the draft. It's likely that they'll stay there. A win locks them in at 10, as Bob said, no worse than the 10th pick. If the Saints lose and the Bears and the Raiders lose, the Saints are still going to have the 10th pick. If the Saints lose, the Raiders or the Bears win, the Saints will move to number 9. And if the Saints lose and the Raiders and Bears win, they will move to number 8. That is probably the most plain, simple way we can explain that, but it does not look that the Saints could get any higher than the 8th pick in the upcoming NFL draft. With that, Bob, we'll touch on it lightly. Again, there's so much time to talk about this, but some more reports coming out of, how do I want to say this? Out of NFL circles. Remember, we had that whole conversation last week about what NFL circles really means. But more rumors out of NFL circles that Aaron Glenn is going to be, or looks to be, the guy, and that the Saints want to stick with someone they know. Again, stuff that we already heard a week ago, but things escalated a little bit more on this last NFL Circles conference that we missed out on. I'm a little upset that we didn't get the invite to the NFL Circles conference.
It couldn't be because I insult them at every turn, could it?
That's probably what it is. But the other thing was that the report was that Loomis allegedly would like the next head coach to keep a handful of the assistants, and that Aaron Glenn would likely do that. This is where my problem lies with all of that. And it goes into different facets of things and different examples, right? When you look at situations like hiring a new head coach, but wanting to keep the staff you already have in place, you have to go down the line of history. And there are not a lot of examples of that. You know why? Because typically when you hire a head coach, they don't want to keep whatever staff you had before. They want to bring in their own. So ironically, Bob, because I'm in the city of Charlotte, the most recent example of this that I found was with the Charlotte Hornets, the basketball franchise. A handful of years ago, 3 years ago, they fired their head coach, and they had came to terms with a gentleman by the name of Kenny Atkinson, who's now the head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers, who have one of the better records in the league. But they came to terms on a contract for him to take over as head coach. And then 10 days later, he said, "No, thanks, I'm good." And people were like, well, what happened? The ownership in Charlotte wanted him to keep a ton of the pre-existing staff because they had 1 year left on their contract. And they were cheap, and they wanted to, not pay 2 contracts. So he said, "No, I'm good." The Hornets go back to their fallback plan, and they haven't been very successful since. That's the most recent example of that I can find in any of the major sports. But I think that's very concerning and very alarming if it's true. Again, it comes from NFL circles. We don't know, because NFL circles could mean a lot of different things. It's the same thing as putting per source. You're like, well, who's the source? Mm-hmm. It's a very mysterious, masked way of not naming people. But it's a concern, right? Like, there's a lot of things around Mickey Loomis, which we've talked about this year. 2-3 years ago, nobody would have ever thought Mickey Loomis would have the fan base turning on him and this, that, and the other. But all of a sudden, it's like, okay, Mickey's a little bit on the hot seat, at least with the fan base. I don't really think with the ownership of the team. But there's a lot of people pointing fingers at Mickey Loomis. And if this ends up being true, that Mickey wants a lot of the staff retained, I'm really concerned at all the way to the top at the front office. Now, if the NFL circles are just saying, well, Mickey Loomis wants Kubiak to be retained as the offensive coordinator, okay, that makes sense. You just brought him in. That's a lot different than saying a lot of the staff. And that's where the whole miscommunication of what is an NFL circle and what is really being communicated comes in. But what's your initial reaction to those reports that allegedly the Saints may want a lot of the assistants kept? under contract, regardless of who they hire as head coach.
My initial reaction to all that crap is just that crap. It's disgust. My reactions are disgust and hilarity, because there are no legitimate sources about these kind of things right now. We don't know all the coaching vacancies. B, there is not a single team out there, Saints or otherwise, that are tipping their hand towards any information. So, NFL sources or so and so reporting this or such and such reporting that. They're guessing. They are guessing. That's why my own articles, I word things very carefully, and I know I just, I've written a recent article about Aaron Glenn. I've written a recent article just last night about Matt Nagy, potentially being candidates for the Saints. The people that are reporting that Aaron Glenn is going to be the guy, or Mike McCarthy, if he's not re-signed by Dallas when his contract expires on the 14th, he's going to be the guy. They're guessing. They are guessing, flat out guessing. I wish they'd just say that, because that's all it is. Now, with Mickey Loomis, there is a track record, certainly a recent one, of Mickey doesn't like change. That much is clear. He wants continuity within his coaching staff. He has his guys, also very clear. So the people that are guessing that Aaron Glenn is going to be the guy, or they'll have interest in Mike McCarthy, or they want to go with a guy that they're familiar with, throwing, thereby pulling Joe Brady into the conversation. Okay, the trends of Mickey Loomis have shown that, but we've seen no indication that that's what the Saints are going to do. So don't give me this garbage about Aaron Glenn or Mike McCarthy. Fill in name here. So and so is the favorite. There are no favorites right now. There are no front runners. You don't even know what jobs are available. You don't know what coaches are available. And by the way, no team is permitted to talk to a prospective coaching candidate if they are employed by an NFL team currently until a virtual interview between January 8th and I believe it's the 13th. So they can't talk to anybody. Yeah, of course they're going to interview Aaron Glenn. I do believe that they're going to interview Vrabel, Matt Nagy. If McCarthy becomes available, he's going to be interviewed. Joe Brady will probably get an interview along with the cast of thousands, the Ben Johnsons, the Brian Flores, et cetera, and some dark horse candidates. So, Saints fans, Who Dat Nation, fans of any team that are looking for a head coach, don't go getting yourself all bent out of shape, because these sources have absolutely nothing. Zero, nada, zippo. There is no news to report. They are just guessing. And Brendan and I could sit here and give you who we think the front runners could be, but that's just it. And we admit it, who we think they could be. We could give you our favorites. And that's the other thing. So-and-so is reporting that such and such a name could be a favorite of the Saints or the Raiders or whomever. No, that's their favorite. So you don't have to read between the lines on this one. It is very clearly black and white. There is no news right now. It's frustrating to wait, especially if you're a team like your Saints that are going to be looking for a coach. But the only thing and I get it, the only thing you do have to go by is Mickey Loomis's track record, which is going with a face he knows, going with a name he knows, a guy he's familiar with. But guess what? He didn't know Sean Payton back in 2006. That's something that these sources aren't reporting either. So, that's my basic reaction to it all.
Well, and Bob and I talked about this the other week, too, was that just like any job, it makes a lot of sense that if there's someone who you feel is qualified for a position that you're probably going to give them a call, regardless if they end up being the guy who gets the job or not.
Sure.
All right. And the example that I used last week or the week prior was that Bob has a background in jewelry. I have called Bob when I've had jewelry questions. That makes sense. If I had a if all of a sudden I just became the GM, regional GM of a ton of Jared stores down here in Charlotte, and I needed a guy to be the general manager of a specific store, I'd probably call Bob. Hey, Bob, I know it's a long shot, but you want to move to Charlotte?
Yeah, not interested. But
yes.
moving to Charlotte, sure. Heading up a Jared, no.
So, and that's the point, is just at the end of the day, if you know somebody who's in that line of work and you have an opening, of course you're going to give them a call. You're going to sit down. You're going to have a conversation. That's probably what's going to happen. Like you said, Joe Brady, Aaron Glenn, two guys that the Saints are familiar with. But NFL circles, and we talked about this, and this is the last point I'm going to make on it, can literally be the two scouts of the Las Vegas Raiders are sitting and chatting and going, what would make a lot of sense for the Saints? Probably bringing in a familiar face. Wouldn't that make sense? Yeah, Bill, that would make a lot of sense. Okay, there's your NFL circles. There's your source.
So, I mean, we're in NFL media, so we are technically NFL circles. We are not an insider. We are not an insider for sure.
So there we go. Okay, per NFL circles, Bob and Brendan, the Saints will probably lose today. Somebody go tweet that.
There is a game to talk about, isn't there?
Yeah, there is, unfortunately. We kind of highlighted some of the injuries, most of the injuries. I highlighted the fact that Vegas doesn't know if the Saints are going to score 14 points tonight or not, this afternoon or not. So I do want to focus, I guess, on the Saints defense first, because it was a game. The first time these two teams met, you referred to that game a lot when talking about the Saints' lack thereof being able to stop the run. This is a Tampa Bay team that I think has an identity, but there's been a lot of games this year where Tampa plays really well and plays up to standard. And then there's other games where you're like, who the hell is this? Like, where's the Tampa Bay team from last week?
Yeah.
That is typical of a team that's right around 500 and is going into the last week of the season not knowing if they're going to make the playoffs or not. So for this Tampa Bay team, is it just copy and paste from earlier this year where you're like, we're just going to hand the ball to Bucky Irving 100 times? Or do you feel like this is a game? And remember, too, incentive-wise, Baker Mayfield, if he leads the league in passing yards, has an incentive in his contract as well. I'm not sure how close he is because I know Burrow has had some stellar weeks the last few weeks. But with all of that said, you have your number one receiver and your quarterback both under incentives as well. How much are coaches really paying attention to that? I don't know. But ultimately, what is the offensive game plan going up against the Saints today for Tampa Bay? Because they had a stellar day on the ground the last time these two teams met.
Yeah, and they've certainly gone back and watched that film, and that was that was a healthier Saints defense. This is going to be one that does not have Marshawn Lattimore on the field, that does not have Paulson Adebo, Pete Werner, or Willie Gay on the field. So if I'm the Buccaneers, I'm going into this hopefully. Well, if you're rooting for a Saints win, hopefully the Buccaneers are overconfident. If you're a Buccaneers fan, you're hoping your team isn't too overconfident. Because if I'm Tampa Bay, I'm going to the end of this game thinking that I'm going to be able to establish the run fairly easily and basing everything that I do around that. Now, I got to say, I am both surprised and impressed at how balanced the Tampa Bay offense has been this year. They are third in overall yardage, fourth in points scored, I think. Passing offense third. No surprise there. Not when you have a gunslinger like Mayfield and a deep receiving core headed by Godwin and Evans. But the Buccaneers rank fourth in rushing production. That's what shocks me. And I mean, like you said, this is largely personnel-wise the same Tampa Bay team that put up 594 total yards on the Saints, 277 on the ground. They averaged 8 yards per run. I've mentioned Sean Tucker's name so often that that I may personally be responsible for him showing up as a hashtag. But I mean, you mentioned Bucky Irving. That's who the Buccaneers lead back is. That's who they want to be featured. And even Bucky Irving had 81 yards, on the ground against the Saints earlier this year. It was just Sean Tucker that stole at least my headlines, with his 136 on the ground and 192 total. It's easy to sit here and say, oh, yeah, the Saints have a puncher's chance on the defensive side if they could get to Mayfield, because if you can, he's going to throw a few balls to you. If they get to Mayfield, if they control the line of scrimmage, if guys like Demario Davis and Alontae Taylor, recognize those gaps and make plays in the gaps. But we haven't seen the Saints do that literally all year at all. So you got to ask yourself, how the hell are the Saints going to stop the Buccaneers? And I'm not sure how they do it. I just gave down all those yardage totals, and don't forget the Tampa Bay put up 51 points on the Saints, and that's with Baker Mayfield throwing 3 interceptions in that game. People forget that, as well they should. When the Buccaneers won so convincingly. So even if you say, well, if the Saints get a couple turnovers, they have a chance. Do they? I don't know. I don't see it. Again, you're going to need Demario, Cam, Tyrann Mathieu to dip their toe in the fountain of youth, and play like the prime players that we've been so used to seeing. Chase Young show why. The Saints brought him in free agency, and Brissy continuing that monstrous run he's had. Now the individual matchups I am looking forward to is Alontae Taylor and Kool-Aid McKinstry versus Godwin and Evans. It's not Lattimore versus Evans, but I still think that this could be a good matchup. If the Saints stop the run and make Liam Cohen, who, by the way, is my personal favorite for Saints head coach, if they make offensive coordinator Liam Cohen feel like, okay, we got to throw the ball with Baker, we got to lean on Baker, then maybe you have a chance. But again, I don't see how the Saints are going to do it that way, because they haven't.
I think the biggest thing in this game is not so much the Saints defense, because I don't know what to expect out of the Saints defense at this point, because they haven't shown me anything. You said dip your toe in the fountain of youth for some of those guys. Well, unfortunately, there's a reason why all 3 of those guys' names have came up as guys that could very well not be on the roster next year. As much as Cameron Jordan and Demario Davis will go down as, absolute Saints greats, and Tyrann Mathieu will always be, Louisiana's son that returned home, and it didn't go the way that a lot of people thought it would. But there is a story there, and a guy that's loved in Louisiana and always will. But there's a reason those 3 guys are like, well, they might not be around. One, because, the youthful fountain is very far away at this point for them. Their careers are slowly coming to an end. And you have seen a dip in production from each one of them. Even Demario Davis, who, 2-3 years in a row was an All-Pro selection, but not a Pro Bowl selection up until last year. The Saints have no Pro Bowlers this year. We haven't touched on that, but that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. But I don't think the Saints defense is the story of this game. I think the Saints offense, or lack thereof offense, is the story in this game. Because even if the Saints defense does everything they're supposed to, right? And let's say Tampa's held to 20 to 24 points. I don't know that I have any confidence the Saints offense can score 20 to 24 points. I just don't. And this is coming from a guy that it has been well documented on this show. I was very excited for Spencer Rattler, the prospect Spencer Rattler. There have been times this year where you have seen, hey, Spencer Rattler could be this, right? There have been flashes. There's been a lot of flashes of, oh, this is a rookie quarterback that was drafted on day 3. Mm-hmm. But even with all of that, it's not like he has any supporting cast today. And it's not like he's had much of a supporting cast through the, today will be the 6th start of the season. He hasn't had much of a supporting cast for a lot of those. Is that his fault? No. Is he still the starting quarterback that lost games? Yes. And that's what it boils down to. They're going to be with Clyde Edwards-Helaire at running back and Jamal Williams. Jamal, who has had no role in this offense. Edwards-Helaire, who was picked up last week. And then outside of MVS, you're still with, Bob could very well be playing receiver later today. And then the offensive line that, while the tackles, and I don't think we talk about the tackles enough because of how bad the offense has been, but Fuaga's been very good. Trevor Penning has made a very big leap on the right side. And some of you might be like, well, he's still not great in pass protection or this or that. It is tenfold better than it was last year.
Mm-hmm.
He's not just this absolute liability and turnstile every snap, right? But the interior of the offensive line, you said it yourself. No Lucas Patrick, no Eric McCoy.
And unfortunately, Cesar Ruiz will play.
See, I was hoping Bob wouldn't go there, but Bob went there. I avoided that name for a reason, and Bob was like, no, sir. He's still on that offensive line. But yeah, anyway, I mean, that's where my issues lie. I mean, the Tampa defense isn't great. They do have two of the best safeties in the league when they're healthy. But I have no idea. Like, it's almost painful to say, but there was that stretch of Panthers football this year that we remember because we were playing the Panthers during those week 1 and then through the first few games of Bryce Young before he got benched for Andy Dalton. Like, that was a putrid offense. Like, this offense might be worse to watch than that Panthers offense.
Yep.
And when's the last time the Saints have been shut out twice in a season? Because I think that is a true possibility today.
I don't know. I wish I'd have looked
either.
that up going in because I agree with you. I think it's a distinct possibility. I certainly don't see this team reaching the end zone multiple times. And this is against not only a Buccaneers defense that hasn't been really good statistically, but they're really banged up too. Especially in the secondary and at linebacker. But just like we said with the Saints defense, I don't know how New Orleans is going to take advantage of that. It wouldn't shock me if Clyde Edwards-Helaire had a relatively productive day. But I mean, relatively productive in this offense without Alvin Kamara and all those other players, relatively productive could be 50 yards on the ground. And that ain't going to get it done. Because if your leading rusher runs for 50 yards, chances are you need your quarterback to throw for 260 or more to win. How's that going to happen when A, you can't protect Spencer Rattler, and B, Rattler has nobody outside of MVS to throw to? It wouldn't surprise. Juwan Johnson has had some good games against the Buccaneers. Foster Moreau has had a terrific season. This kind of gone kind of lost in the waves of a tsunami of a disaster. For New Orleans. But you're not going to dominate defenses with a Foster Moreau or a Juwan Johnson. There's no standout weapon for Spencer Rattler to seek out to take a game over, and that's why that's why Vegas doesn't think the Saints are going to score 14 points.
Simple as that. I think ultimately I would be surprised. I'm with you on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. For those of you who are making bets today, or putting some parlays or pick'em entries together, Clyde Edwards-Helaire's line or projection was like 32.5. Take the over. Like, he's going to get a lot more carries than Jamal Williams does today. There's no and ifs or buts about it. So go ahead and do that. But other than that, don't place any real money on the Saints for anything outside of Clyde Edwards-Helaire to run for like 32.5 yards. Because that's the only realistic one that I see. I can see
MVS getting some yards or making a big play or two. But
he has an incentive in his contract for a touchdown today. If he scores a touchdown today, there's a little bit of bonus money his way. But even then, it's just I don't know if I've ever been this pessimistic about a Saints offense. Now, given a lot of the years we've covered this team, it's been Drew Brees, but even without Drew Brees, even through the rotating circle of that this is going to be a fun game in about 10 years to play, Bob, was the quarterbacks after Drew Brees. You have Trevor Siemian year, Andy Dalton. I'm not going to name these in order. Ian Book, Jameis, Derek,
Taysom
started games.
Spencer
Hayner. So that's 8 right there. Am I missing? I feel like I'm still missing someone.
I think you got them all.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think it's been 8.
That wasn't as hard as I thought. But no, I mean, even through all those, like, again, I don't know if there's ever been a time that I've been just like, yeah, this offense is going to be awful, because at least they had Alvin Kamara or they had another playmaker. Like in this game, there is no one that I'm looking to who's like, man, that guy could really make a play when I need one. And that goes back to, yes, there's a lot of injuries, but even without the injuries, and again, we'll talk about this a lot in the offseason, there are way too many problems with this team. And there should not be anyone that believes, if the Saints knock out that first-round pick, they're going to be right back in the playoffs, because they're not. This team has a lot of holes. And fundamentally, in the way that it's structured, and that whole thing we've talked about for however many years and paying off the credit card debt, like, they've gotten to a point where it's like, okay, like, it's really time to kind of just strip this whole thing back and start over. And offloading contracts, and you're going to get to points where dudes are going to have to get paid, and I don't know who they're going to keep. Like, first and foremost for Chris Olave, I hope his health is there, right? Yeah. I hope that throughout this offseason and meeting with specialists and trying to get back on the field, that it is determined that he can continue his football career, because I don't think it's as big of a question as it was when that concussion happened initially, but it's still something you definitely want to monitor. But even with all of the injury for Chris Olave and the concussions, like, that dude's still owed a payday here soon. And Rashid Shaheed's probably going to be owed a payday. And whatever you decide to do at quarterback, because I think Derek Carr's going to be the starter next year, but you never know. Like, there's so many things, do you bring Chase Young back on a contract if you're not going to bring back Cameron Jordan? Like, there's so many different things here. Where this team is far from like one player away or two players away or a good offseason away. But if the NFC South still sucks, like, you never know. Maybe you can sneak in at, right at 500 or around 500 into a playoff spot. There's a lot of things wrong with this football team. And that will keep Bob busy all summer writing articles. What is wrong with this team? I can't wait for your positional like recaps, like grading the positions throughout the year, because you're gonna have like grades with starters, grades without starters, and then just overall grade. Like, it's gonna have to have a severe breakdown. I hope that goes well for you, Bob, because I wouldn't want to be writing those articles right now, because they're tough. They're really tough. You also have to have like a little like asterisk for like pre-week 3. You have like before week 3 and after week 3. But Bob, with all that said, ultimately, how do you see this game going?
I think it's going to be a Tampa Bay rout. I mean, not only are the New Orleans Saints a vastly undermanned team going into this game, but we've seen very, 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 very little fight out of this squad for the last month. Outside of really the second half against Washington, they've not come to play. And even against a division rival, I do expect your Cams, your DeMarios, and a handful of other players to be fired up, but the team in general has packed it in emotionally a long time ago, and I think that that's going to show. Tampa Bay, on the other hand, are playing for their playoff lives. And they're on a roll right now. The Buccaneers have won 5 of the last 6. Now, only one of those 6 games have been against a team with a winning record. I think that needs to be pointed out. So, let's not let's not overrate the Buccaneers here, but Tampa Bay is the far superior team to the New Orleans Saints right now, and I think it shows early and often today. I think the Buccaneers win this one 34-10.
We're close. We're closer than I thought. I think this is going to be bad. I think it's going to be ugly. I think it's going to be over at halftime.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think the Saints score a garbage touchdown, which puts people over that 14.5.
And look, it wouldn't surprise me, because if we're right and the game is over by halftime in the third quarter, it's not like the Buccaneers are looking at a bye week in the playoffs, so they're going to want to probably start to sit people down. Rattler or Hainer, driving the team to a garbage score or two against third stringers and practice squad guys wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, so I'm going to take the Buccaneers 42-17. I think it's going to be bad. But like I said, I do think the Saints get a garbage time score or two to at least, cash a couple people out. Let's see. Haven't got so many comments today. Jerry joined us today. Happy 2025 to you, Jerry.
Happy 2025. Happy New Year, everybody.
John Butler said he agrees with you 100% on your last few comments. Mark over on YouTube says he's enjoyed us all year. Excited for the draft coverage. Appreciate it. Thanks for hanging out with us. And the draft coverage will be a lot more fun than the last however many weeks have been. Hopefully. Bob's like, it can't get any worse. So, oh man. Well, guys, Bob and I will have a little bit of a post-game wrap-up today. We'll keep it pretty short. Even if it's a victory, I think we're going to keep it pretty short, just simple. Recap the game, maybe pick a couple things to talk about from the season as a whole. But you guys should have probably no more than like a 20, 25-minute podcast to listen to in the morning. Simply because, well, this is how the year has gone. We're kind of at a loss anyway. So with all that, Bob, where can people follow you and all those positional recaps that I already mentioned throughout the offseason?
Listen, and the media work for those of us that actually work in the media and not throw out guesses and half-assed sourced comments. The work not only continues through the off season, but that's actually when it gets fun. Season breakdowns, positional breakdowns, free agency needs, free agency projections, draft needs, draft projections, draft film. We're going to be doing all of that. And you can follow all of those pieces from me at the Saints News Network or the SI.com team page for the New Orleans Saints. Also post them on my personal page, social media, which is Bob Rose on Facebook, at Bobby R 2613 over on Twitter, and make sure that you continue to tune into the Bayou Blitz as well. We're going to continue to do weekly shows. Brendan and I are not going to give you playoff pre-games, but we are going to give you playoff post-games. So kind of a playoff wrap-up, every week of the postseason. I'm thinking we will throw a Super Bowl pre-game at you, for sure. Maybe a conference championship pre-game too. We're still working that out. So we're still going to come at you through the Bayou Blitz every week for multiple shows per week, and make sure that you catch all of our past shows as well. Various ways to do that, which Brendan will get into.
Yeah, you can catch all of our past shows, YouTube. If you guys are tuning in on YouTube, all you got to do is go through the archives, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Red Circle. There's so many ways you can listen to it. And like I said, a lot of these, especially as Bob and I go into the postseason, these postseason wrap-ups, we will be live, but they will also be available for your rides to work on Monday morning via Spotify. Some of those games are late. Some of you guys got, crazy early morning jobs, or, you guys work construction, or you got kids, or this, that, and the other. And it's just easier to catch up on your Monday morning drive with a cup of coffee in your hand. maybe 2 cups of coffee in your hand as Bob devours his. For myself, you can follow me virtually everywhere at BT Boylan. It's going to be an exciting time of year for some of the other things that I do. I'll be back on ESPN Plus doing basketball for the first time in over 4 years this upcoming weekend. So that'll be fun to kind of get back into that scene a little bit. And it's also that time of year where movie submissions are being made to different film festivals. And the film festival that I'm a voter on, our early bird submissions are due tomorrow. So we're getting to that time of year too, where we'll start watching and voting and all that stuff as well. So if any of you guys are interested in that stuff, give me a follow. I'll be sharing some of that stuff as well. For Bob, I'm Brendan. Thanks so much for tuning in to the pregame show all season long. It's our final
Thank you.
of the year for the New Orleans Saints. We'll be back at it with, again, a short post game. You can catch that on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your pods. Until then, hope you guys find some peace, spread love, practice positivity, and enjoy, even if it's a blowout, enjoy the final game of the regular season for the New Orleans Saints. Who dat?